So you want to know how to build a balanced body. Well, today we're going to take a deep dive into symmetry testing because this is how you build strength the right way. All that and more coming up right after this. We are the gym that teaches people how to move instead of just exercise because we believe that health is about performance, not just body image.
Hey everyone, welcome to the show. And in case we haven't met, my name is Rad Burmeister. This is my brother Yani Burmeister, and we are the co-founders of Unity Gym and the co-creators of the Foundation Movement System, where we teach you how to nourish and move instead of diet and exercise. And if you didn't hear Yani give his intro just then, that's because his microphone was on mute. Yeah. So hopefully you can hear us now. Richie, are we good to go? Can you hear Yani? Yeah, awesome. All right, so what's in store for today, Yani?
Mate, we are talking symmetry testing. So yesterday we had a...
Hi, Wayne, by the way.
Yeah, morning, Wayne.
Thanks for the shout-out, brother.
Yesterday we had a little bit of a technical glitch that cut the show short, and we were actually going to go out on the gym floor and test for mobility. And we used the overhead squat test. Now, we will do that a bit later on. This series of shows is coming directly from our Strength Essentials program that we do. We have a mini course on Strength Essentials, and the real guts of the Strength Essentials that we use here for the Foundation Movement System is about testing and assessing the body and ongoing strength testing once you're at a more advanced level to make sure that you're developing a functional body that is well balanced. Because there are, as we spoke about yesterday, if you caught the show with the part that did get through, there is a relationship between the length and tension of the muscle systems in the body that needs to be in balance. Excuse me, and that goes for agonist-antagonist movers of every joint. Think bicep versus tricep for a really simple, simplistic example. But then there's also symmetry for that model as well. And we want to look at limbs from left to right side. And Rad gave an example of a bodybuilding friend of ours who, without knowing it, had massively overdeveloped one side of the body because he'd done too many bilateral movements, not enough symmetry work in the beginning of his training life to iron out any of those deficiencies. Now, the thing that we should talk about here first, before we get out on the gym floor and demonstrate the couple of symmetry tests that we use here in the Foundation Movement System, is what can create these imbalances. And the first one we tipped on yesterday, which Rad spoke about a little bit, is the difference between unilateral and bilateral movements. Now, why don't you give the definition of the difference there and then say why it's important and how we do it?
So the unilateral movements are where each limb moves the resistance independently. So an example would be a pistol squat for lower body, or a split squat for the lower body, or a single leg hamstring curl, or a single leg deadlift. All exercises that we use in the FMS program. For the upper body, an example would be bicep curls with dumbbells, or tricep extensions with dumbbells. They're unilateral movements, or a single arm shoulder press, or a single arm bent over row. A bilateral movement is when both limbs move the force what's not independently, what am I looking for here? Together. They share the load. So an example would be a barbell back squat, a body weight squat, a barbell deadlift for the lower body. They're all examples of bilateral movements. A hip thrust, a supine hip thrust. And for the upper body, a pull-up, bench press with a barbell, a standing shoulder press, or any calisthenics movement that isn't one arm. So a push-up, a pike push-up, or anything like that.
Yeah, that's the first thing. You know, if you've only ever worked, and the bilateral movements are the big bang for your buck movements. They tend to work. They use more muscle. They burn more calories. And they're probably more popular. You can also load them up a lot more. You know,
I can't cite any of the research, but I'm pretty sure the jury's in on what improves athletic performance better. There was a phase there about 10 years ago where a lot of people were trying to prove that this functional training, doing unilateral work, was more effective for increasing athletic performance, and I'm pretty sure it was smashed, and it was shown that that's wrong. That the big bang for your buck bilateral barbell movements improve athletic performance better. They make you stronger.
Absolutely, because you can lift more weight, you can load more weight,
and it stimulates the central nervous system more.
Absolutely.
But that said, what we're talking about here for structural balance and symmetry, those bilateral movements don't create symmetry in the body as well as unilateral movements do. So
if you don't have a good
imbalances-
foundation, if you've got an imbalanced foundation, then you're going to overdevelop the dominant side. And here's the thing, and this rolls into the next reason why we become unsymmetrical. Now, no human is perfectly symmetrical, so we should just put that on the record. From leg length discrepancies to actual structural, like ear height deformities, different things, eye level, all sorts of stuff. One side of the body to the other side is not symmetrical, and that carries over to the muscle systems as well. And the main reason why is because most of us grow up with a dominant side. It's usually always the same side. So if I played football for many years, soccer, I kick the ball, I strike the ball much harder with my right leg than my left leg. I also throw a ball much more functionally with my right arm than my left arm. I write with my right arm. That's my dominant side. And over a lifetime, you get a change in the posture of your body because of that dominant side. Different sports can make this dramatically more obvious. Tennis I used as an example yesterday. So what we need to understand is that going into a training program, a strength training program, you are going to have a dominant muscle system. And that's why there's a need for anatomical structural balance assessments and programming in the initial phases to make sure that the body's going to stimulate and grow and develop as evenly as humanly possible. Because you do run into problems when you overdevelop. The obvious one that we use with our bodybuilding mate was a physique issue, and in bodybuilding you need symmetry. Like the judges will judge you down on that. But from a functional standpoint, you can run into injury and things like that because you'll have a side that is constantly lagging, more exposed, and more vulnerable. And also, it can get to a point where it can put torsional forces through the body because of that imbalance, that structural imbalance. So it's very, very important. The spine becomes very compromised when you've got a real bad symmetry imbalance, and there's lots of issues that can occur with it. So we, in the Foundation Movement System, and with many good strength coaches, I learnt this, as I said yesterday, from the late Charles Poliquin, and then more into it from Tony Battaji, from the BFI, Battaji Fitness Institute. These guys put a big emphasis on symmetry training at the start, anatomical structural balance training, to iron out any of these deficiencies before you start lifting heavy on the barbells. And it's certainly been a good step for us. It sets a really great, strong platform, and it really opens the gateway to training endlessly in the future with minimal risk of injury, and that's sort of why we do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Go on. I was just going to say, so we'll talk about the two tests that we do for symmetry testing and why, and then get out on the gym floor and we can demonstrate them.
Well, let's do it.
Yeah, cool. So I'm using the notes directly taken from the Strength Essentials download that you get with the course. And what we're going to be doing here is we're going to be testing the hips, we're going to be testing the shoulders, and we're going to be testing, the hips, the hip flexor and the glute complex, because we want to know that those structures are in symmetry, because they're the areas that can put a lot of pressure on the spine if we're doing heavy squatting, heavy deadlifting, heavy bench pressing. So the test that we're going to do is a scratch test. For the shoulders, it's a modified scratch test where we're testing both the whole shoulder complex in the front, in the top, and in the back, where we reach behind the back. These tests are heavily affected by what we call hypertrophic restriction. So in guys that have larger muscles, you're going to be restricted. You're not going to test as well as someone with very little muscle mass. Then we're going to test hip internal rotation, and then we're going to test hip extension in a Thomas test. So should we get out on the gym floor? And Rad can be my model for this, and I'll walk you guys through it.
Test.
Not for the scratch test. Okay.
Well.
All right. I might actually I might actually, because I've got Kalisha here, I'll get two people to demonstrate the scratch test. I'll get Richard to demonstrate it, and Rad, you can film. And I'll get Kalisha to demonstrate it, because you'll see two big differences here. Richard's got a little bit more muscle mass than Kalisha, and you should see that a difference. Do you mind taking your shirt off for this?
I can.
You can, yeah. Kalisha has to take her shirt off too. Yeah. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to get Richard to turn around so we can see his back. And we're going to get one arm behind the back here and the other arm to reach over. Make a fist with both hands. We don't want to actually hold them, yeah. So what we're looking at and how we gauge this, I wish I had a texter because I draw on his back. We actually put a mark here on the distance between the two closed fists, okay? Remember, we're not, to a large degree, we're not looking right now at how flexible he is, which he's actually quite good for a guy with a bit of muscle mass. But now let's have a look at the other side. We're looking for symmetry here, okay? And you can see immediately that he's got a smaller gap there. So that tells me that his side on the other side here is tighter. He's tighter through the pec on the other side. If I get my notes here, you can relax, Richie, for a sec. So the modified Apley scratch test, the notes that I've got here: place your arm above your head, reach behind your neck and touch as far down the upper back as possible. The diagnosis: this motion assesses thoracic mobility and the flexibility of the glenohumeral, adductors, internal rotators, scapular downward rotators and depressors, and the scapular protractors and the triceps brachii. So come back over here for a second. Go back into this side behind the back there. So we can test now that the shoulder in the front here is definitely tighter. This arm, if you swap them over again, is reaching pretty much identical. So it's very, very nice here. But it's the tricep brachii over here and the pec muscles and the internal rotators of the shoulder are tighter on that side. But go back to the other side again. So he needs to do a little bit of work over here to be able to get this arm down. But what I can take from here, and this is where we resort back to the example I gave before, I guarantee you from this here, I can pretty much make the assumption that Richard's dominant arm is his right arm. And the reason for that, you're right-handed, right? Yeah. Yep. The reason for that is because, just relax for a second. So if we have a look here, can you get straight on to Richard's back? You should be able to notice the height difference in his shoulders. Can you see that in the video there? Yeah? Yeah, so his right shoulder is like a decent amount. The right clavicle and shoulder blade sits about 1.5 centimetres to 2 centimetres below the left side. And that's referred to as dominant side scoliosis. This side here, because it's his dominant side, has adapted to the use. He's using that side a lot more. And so that's naturally going to internally rotate that shoulder a little bit more, and it often depresses it a little bit more. I'm exaggerating that now. That's not how he usually stands. But that is going to restrict the mobility in that right side. Okay? Let's get Kalisha to demonstrate now. Thanks, Richard. Take it all off. Yep. You don't really have to, but... Okay, so without any stretching this morning, so let's do the scratch test over there. Beautiful. So she's got about 3 inches in between the arms there. Let's go to the other side. And she's got about 5 inches to the side there. So this here shows me that her left side, in the same way that Richard's right side is tight, her left side is tight. Now, are you left-handed?
Yeah.
There you are. Yeah, there you go. So she's got the same thing happening on the left side here. Now, if you stand up straight, interestingly though, the height of your shoulders is not... Yeah, you've got more scoliosis lean to the right side. So yeah, absolutely. So Kalisha's actually got something going down that she's aware of, that she's had diagnosis of in the lower back here. And so she's actually leaning to that side if we exaggerate it. And this is what I said before, guys. No one is symmetrical. And it's important you know, when we gather the information from these tests, it's important to understand that I don't want to catastrophize the body and freak people out and go, oh my God, Kalisha deadlifts, squats heavy, bench presses heavy. She's a beast for a woman, you know. And most people, if they go, oh, I've got scoliosis in my back, I can't lift heavy weight, it's bullshit, you know. Don't catastrophize your body. Learn it, understand it, and then you want to capitalize on your strengths and work around your weaknesses. Okay, the next test we're going to go for, the next assessment for symmetry we're going to go for is the straight leg and rotational hip symmetry test. So, Rad, I'll get you for this one. What we'll do is, you can just lay down here. So we're testing hamstrings here and we're testing hip external rotators, adductors, so lay right up on the bed. In a perfect environment, we'd probably have a massage table for this, but we're not going to use that. That's it. There you go. Beautiful. So for the straight leg test, what I want to do is take his leg straight up. We want to see the hips nice and level. We want to go right up. We want to make sure that he is nice and neutral in the spine. And then we stretch this until we feel it. I'm not going to go ridiculous here because Rad's quite flexible, but we want to feel where we get a good amount of resistance. Okay, if I push any further than that, it's going to be a pretty deep stretch for Rad. So we make a note of where that one's gone, and then we repeat that same process on the other side. And we assess, he's pretty bloody good there, symmetry-wise. This one might feel a little bit more flexible. Does that feel more bendy to you? So he's maybe got a tiny little imbalance from this side to this side, where this one's a little bit more flexible. What we're looking for here is a nice straight leg. Okay, that's good. And we're looking for symmetry. Okay, here's a little thing that we didn't do yesterday. If you can't lie with a neutral spine and get your leg to 90 degrees there, it's not safe for you to squat yet, under load. And that'll freak a lot of people out because there's a lot of people that don't have hamstring mobility to squat, and that's a really important test that you guys should be doing. For Olympic lifting, to be able to hit a bottom range ballistically, you need 110 degrees of flexion there. That's unrestricted flexion. So I'm not talking about warming up, getting limber and then testing it. That's like if your body can't go there, you've got no business being under heavy load. You are fucking up your body. You're damaging your body by doing so. Okay, so that's the straight leg test. Now we're going to do the hip rotation test. We want to get his knee to 90 degrees. I'm going to put a little bit of pressure on here and then I'm going to internally rotate. I know that Rad's quite tight in this position, so I'm making an idea of what angle he's getting here. If I was going to be really brutally accurate, I'd have an angle. You can buy I can't remember what it's called, but you can buy a tool that you can measure the exact angle. And what I'm looking for here is symmetry. So this one's probably a tiny bit tighter, but it's not bad enough for me to worry about it. Okay, so have a look at the notes. If he's got short hamstring, if his leg won't go straight and won't get to 100 degrees, so 90 degrees is here, 100's here, then he's got short hamstrings. But more important than range of motion is the symmetry between the two. With the internal rotation, if he can't get to 90 degrees there, then it's a piriformis and medial glute tightness. So he needs to do a little bit more glute stretching, but Rad knows that. He's got quite tight glutes. Quite strong glutes. Again, we're looking more for symmetry than we're looking for range of motion. Now the last one we're doing is a modified Thomas test. So we're going to slide right to the front, and we may not be high enough here. You need a bit of height for this one, particularly if you've got really flexible hip flexors. But I know that Rad's quite tight in the hip flexors because of his spondylolisthesis and FAI. What's that? Yeah, you need to shift a tiny bit more up on the, yeah, that's it, there you go. I need to lock your, so what I'm doing here is I'm locking his femur here all the way up so that I see that he goes into a posterior pelvic tilt. And then what I want to see is the angle of this femur. and I'm looking for it to sit neutrally or even go into slight extension. If it goes into flexion at all, I know that there's a deficiency in the hip flexors over here. The other thing I'm looking for is where the leg hangs. So if his knee won't bend and it stays out here, I know that there's a deficiency in the quadriceps. So if we just let it hang, and I want to see where it goes neutrally, it should sort of sit just below the knee. So Rad's pretty good there. And his hip flexor is okay. If it sits above, if it flexes to above 5 degrees, that's a problem in the hip flexor.
That's where it was 5 years ago.
Yeah.
When I got out of the army.
That's right. So Rad's saying here that 5 years ago his knee was about there when I did this test. So naturally right now he's opened up a lot. But when he came out of the army, the military service, his back was totally stuffed. So now we're going to test the other side. And he had major deficiencies in the body, especially after the injury. So I'm taking that femur to its full range of movement, and then we're seeing the angle over here. And it looks pretty good. I actually think this side is sitting better than the other side.
It is.
Yeah.
This side's not telling.
Yeah, what we're talking about here is that this side is a little bit more flexible than the other side. You can see that the quadricep here is a little bit tighter. It needs to come in here. And if I wanted to give him a really good stretch, I could tuck that in and then push down like that, and that's going to give him a really nice stretch in the hip flexor and quadricep. Okay, beautiful, mate. Those are the 3 symmetry tests. Well, 4 if you count the straight leg and internal rotation symmetry tests. Remember, we'll go into the studio and finish off. That's interesting to see how far your flexibility's come.
Yeah,
It's quite impressive when you think about it. I remember how tight you were.
If you guys have read our content and you read our backstory, my backstory on the emails that come out when you download the flexibility blueprint and stuff, it's all true. Where I was when I got out of the army in 2012, and when I got out, my body was so badly beaten up. And when I did this test with Yani the first time, my femur was well above flat. It was so goddamn tight. And same with my internal rotation test. I couldn't, like today I got to about 70 degrees, 75 degrees. I could barely get past 45 degrees. So compared to somebody that's a freak and ridiculously flexible, I'm still not on that same league as them. But considering that I'm 41 and when I got out of the army I was 34, and that I've gotten better in that time, and all of those gains actually really happened in the last 4 years, because for the first couple of years that I got out of the army, we hadn't created the 18-minute stretching routine. We hadn't created our FMS program, and we didn't have the knowledge was there for Yani and me, but it wasn't put into a program where we were doing this daily training to get better. And so it's pretty cool to see how much I've improved by doing those
absolutely tests. I think that's fantastic.
Yeah.
So guys,
and that's stone cold. In fact, I actually feel quite tight today because I did quite a tough training session yesterday. So, and that's the idea of those tests. You're meant to do nothing more than maybe like a 1 or 2 minute warm up where you just do a couple of squats and just move your spine a bit, and that's it.
Yeah, I wouldn't even. I'd just test cold, because you want to know how the body's functioning cold. Now, so where is this useful? Where does this come into play? Well, it gives you enough insight or feedback to know where your focal points should be, because everyone has areas of the body that need more work, and you should be training for symmetry. You should be training for symmetry. Why is that important? To reduce the risk of injury, to create a well-balanced physique, to improve function so that there's not an imbalance structurally in your body where your body starts to fight itself. Remember, the concept of anatomical structural balance is well proven. Really great strength coaches around the world use this philosophy to train elite level athletes, and you should. It's a really great way, if you're not an elite level athlete, to be able to go and take the same principles that those people use to achieve insane levels of strength and ability into your training every day. Now, you can, all of this stuff is coming from our Strength Essentials book. There is a truckload more. Tomorrow we're going to go out and demonstrate some of the first phases of the strength testing, which is the more advanced testing. We're going to have to, I guess, demonstrate the mobility test that we do, which is the overhead test. We didn't get to do that yesterday because the video cut out. But you can grab this. It's a Strength Essentials mini course that we've just launched, and it's got, there's 20 pages of content here. We go into the deep philosophies of how we program, why we do the things we do, and it also ends with the anatomical structural balance blueprint, which involves all of these tests and all of the ratios that your body should be operating at to achieve optimal movement mastery. So I can't stress to you how good this course is, guys. It's amazing. We're doing a flash sale in July, Christmas in July sale. It's going to be 50% off. I think it's going to be, all of our programs are going to be 50% off, but this is $149 US. It'll be what, $79 US or something like that?
74, whatever
yeah,
it is.
Yeah. So it's an amazing offer, and I'm putting the finishing touches on all the video lessons that walk you through how to do all this stuff this week. So yeah, guys, get amongst it. Until tomorrow, have you got anything else to wrap up with?
We'll see you tomorrow.
We're doing strength testing tomorrow, guys. Join us again. We'll see you soon. Health is about performance, not just body image.
You better be willing to accept what you're going to have to do to get there.
We'll start focusing on movement goals, strength goals, flexibility goals.
When you nail that skill, it's there forever.
The body image goal doesn't get you that
It's
far.
the consistency and frequency that's going to get you there. It's not the intensity.
There's no shortcuts to mastery and movement. Destination doesn't change overnight, but your direction will.
The gym is not the place to beat up the body that you hate. It's the place to build the body that you love.
We are the gym that teaches people how to move instead of just exercise, because we believe that health is about performance, not just body image.